Okay, I think we'll get started. First off, I just want to say thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your day to join us for our live webinar on graphic design. We'll be covering some strategies to help build your brand online, so be sure to stay tuned to the very end to be a part of our Q&A portion. So let's get it started. A little bit about us. Envita is a full-service digital and social agency specializing in multifamily throughout the country. Next, I would like to introduce my co-host, hailing from Central Phoenix, our junior graphic designer putting the motion in design, Hannah Vaca.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. And this is my cool co-host, Kareen. She's living it up in Tempe, Arizona. She's our awesome brand and design manager.
So what you'll learn today is how to utilize design strategies that will improve your brand presence online, design with purpose, and help give stronger feedback.
The first tip that we have for you guys is to know who your target market is. Your target market is going to be the customers you are focusing your brand around and creating a user experience for. Define who your target market is by asking yourself, how old is my target market? Where do they live? What do they do for a living? People are drawn to brands that they feel they can relate to, which is why it's so important to understand your target market so that you can curate your designs to connect with your target audience. Some tips to help you identify who your target market is to first figure out who your competitors are by looking for products or services similar to your brand's product or service. Brands that are similar to your own are going to have a really similar target demographic. Another tip is to identify the actual benefits of your brand and identify through research what kind of people would benefit from your company. Once you know who your target market is, create a user persona for a few individuals that would utilize your service. Create these personas by asking yourself what your users' hobbies are, what they care about, if they have kids, and so on. By building these personas, you have something to reference back to when creating your designs.
The next tip we'll talk about is color theory. So the colors you use matter because color evokes an emotional response. Color harmony is something that's pleasing to the eye and easy to look at. When colors aren't right, the design can either become boring or chaotic. Colors can easily make or break a design. So on this slide, I will show you on the left image shows warm colors. So red is associated with passion, love, and lust, and it could also be associated with warning or danger or even sometimes anger, hence the term seeing red. Orange signifies energetic and being positive. It can also associate with autumn leaves and seasonal transitions, and it can also make people think of change when they see it. Yellow is considered the happiest hue in the color spectrum. It is associated with sunshine and hope, but it can also be linked to caution. If you look towards your right, that color palette represents calm and relaxation. Blue is calming and also represents honesty, loyalty. Um, you could you could see why many corporate brands use these color schemes because of they want to portray being honest and loyal. Blue can also be associated with sadness and loss depending on the context, but it could also represent peace. Green can represent new beginnings and growth. It is also associated with affluence, money, and stability. Purple is long associated with luxury and royalty. Lighter purples, such as lavender, are considered romantic and also associated with spring. Our next example is one of our clients, the Art on Highland. So since their main focus of their brand is art, our designer focuses on color and harmony together, which keeps the design consistent throughout this Instagram grid. The next topic we'll talk about is typography. So the fonts you choose are conveying a message about your brand and it sets the tone. Typography can show you what information is important. So as you can see, by choosing certain typefaces, if you're going to go through more of a traditional route, you can choose a serif font, which the example is on the top left. Or if you want to show something more stability or modern, you'll choose a sans serif font, which is on the top right. If you want something more elegant or formal, you would use a script font on the bottom left. Or if you want something more modern, you could choose a type like Futura or something more chic like Century Gothic on the on the bottom right. If you want something more friendly or expressive, you'd use a display font, and there's examples on the bottom. These examples of some of our clients use is an example of a sans serif font used to convey a modern and clean feel.
The fourth tip we have to share with you guys is to balance your design. When I say balance, I'm referring to the arrangement of visual elements in your actual design. Using balance, you can create visual stability that's easier for your audience to digest. Balance just overall will help your brand to appear organized and really well thought out. Balance can be achieved through color, scale, and contrast. A lot of people think that balance means symmetry, but that's not usually the case. In the image on the right is an example of a well-balanced design. You can see that the designer used even margins throughout the design. The images themselves are all very similar in their visual weight. Each image has the same background. The designer also chose to put the image with the greatest variation in color larger in the middle. Here's an example of an Instagram story that I made for our client, Mira SF, a really high-end, unique brand. I used balance in the imagery by showing a zoomed in and a zoomed out photo of each feature that we wanted to highlight. You can see I used even margins throughout. The typography is all the same color, and each slide has a lot of negative space to convey luxury. Tip number 5 is to implement emphasis and hierarchy in your designs. Hierarchy is formed when extra visual weight is given to the most important element or message in your design. Hierarchy is a form of balance, but hierarchy organizes the visual elements in order of importance. In the example on the right, the headline is the first thing you see. Since it's on the right of the page, because we read right to left and it's the largest thing on the page, and then immediately the next thing you look at is the CTA down there at the bottom. It says free trial. This makes the user think, oh, cool, I'm going to get something out of this, giving them an incentive to actually read the body copy in the middle of the page. Basically, hierarchy allows for visual control of how your audience is going to digest your design. This is a motion post for the client I previously talked about, Mira SF. I used emphasis by zooming in on the windows of the building, which you can see are a really unique feature. I also used emphasis in the typography by keeping the messaging really simple, but bolding the word views, which was the focus of this graphic.
All right, tip number 6 is movement. Using movement, you can lead the target market's eye through the design work. You can achieve movement by utilizing patterns and rhythm. For example, on the right, you see the designer use slanted design elements and repetitive line patterns to give you the feel of movement. One of our clients, One Camelback, uses a simple repetitive line pattern that is used throughout the Instagram grid and motion posts. Next, we're going to talk about variety and unity. So variety is the use of different elements to add interest to a work of art. It refers to how well the elements of design work together. For example, on the right, the design uses all the primary colors, but at the same contrast, keeping it balanced with the white space. And with the image on the left, you can see the copy on the right balancing the overall design. for our client 5MLK, designed by ours truly, Hannah. She uses a variety of colors and shapes to create interest while also placing emphasis on the primary text content.
So the last tip that we have for you guys, and one of the most important, is to review your designs and improve on them. The first thing you need to do is actually test what designs are working for your brand. You can test the success of your designs by utilizing data and analytics. Data is a really powerful tool that you can use to regularly test the success of your designs. While utilizing data, you can test your designs by making changes to your designs and checking the data to see how they perform. This is really cool because you can actually experiment to see if you can do something better with your designs. The second thing you can do is to improve is to get a second opinion from a professional designer. Having too many eyes on a project can be overwhelming, so keep it focused and ask specific questions about what's working when you're getting feedback. When something isn't working, be open to changing your approach. Try using your brand's colors in new ways. Switch out an old design element that might be getting stale. You could even take your eyes off of the design for a short period of time so that you can come back to it with fresh eyes. Lastly, revisit the goals that you set before your campaign. It goes without saying that you should always be setting goals for your brand. This way you can design with purpose. Revisit your goals while designing to keep your design focused, and then revisit your goals after your campaign to see if you achieve those goals.
So thank you for taking the time to hang out with us today and learn a little bit about design. We hope this was helpful. Our goal was to empower both design and non-designers. As a reminder, we have another webinar next week, preparing your post-COVID content strategy. You can always find our other webinars online at invita.com, and you can sign up for the future webinars. I'm gonna open up to any questions that you guys may have. Okay, so we have a question. What what's your let's see. Let's see. I don't see any questions are being asked, but I guess I could give some more tips. Like I know that was a lot to digest. I think I think always keeping it simple. When you're designing something, I think a lot of people get caught up with like fonts and designs and images. I think starting off with keeping everything simple and just strive for just having good design and just making sure you have a strong call to action. I think that would be great. let's see. We have another question. What is your favorite social media brand account to follow for design ideas? One of mine is The Future. They always give good design, and I think it's honest design. They don't get caught up with the trendy minutia of like this is what's happening now. They just give honest, good design. Hannah, do you have any accounts that you follow?
Yeah, I follow Type Design Class on Instagram. The content is just honestly very visually aesthetic. The typography is the main focus, and they use type to convey like their messaging in a really cool way. If you look at their color scheme, it's just all very cohesive. It's a really good place to look if you need to learn more about typography, but you don't have the time to take an entire class on typography.
We have another question. What was the first design element we discussed? The first one was, well, actually, the first thing you should do is know your target audience, just so you know what to create to appeal to their eye. Do you have, I know, Hannah, you touched on that. Do you want to go a little bit on that?
Yeah, so your target market really is where your brand is going to be interacting. Your target market is just super important because those are your fans. Your target market is going to be the people that are spreading word of mouth about you. So you really do want to make a good impression on your target market. Another thing about your target market is that I touched on this before, but your design really is always going to be catered to them. When I'm designing, I'm thinking about who I'm designing it for. It's not just for the brand, it's for the people that are fans of that brand. It's the people that are going to be thinking about that brand. So I of course designed thinking about like what colors speak to them. What does that target market do for fun? What kind of imagery do they care about?
We have another question. What's your new favorite design trend? Hannah, do you want to go first?
Well, I'm loving seeing a lot of color blocking lately, a lot of really bold typography coupled with just bold color blocking. Sometimes I see it laid out in a Swedish grid style, and I'm very attracted to that type of thing. It almost feels a little bit retro, but with a modern twist on it. You'll see that all over Instagram in tons of branding right now. There's color blocking and really bold typography.
My favorite design trend right now is we're so used to seeing sans serif like typography. I love seeing a good serif type, but not just like a formal serif type. I would like to see it like in a psychedelic form. So kind of going back to like retro or the 70s, seeing that paired with like a lot of strong images. So I do like that a lot of brands are going back to serif fonts. And I don't think we discussed like what's the difference between a sans serif font and a serif font. So a serif font has like a footer at the end of the letter. So sans serif would be one that was like clean. Um, what's a I can't think off the top of my head, Hannah. What's a sans serif font that Apple that everybody knows?
Helvetica is
Helvetica and
a
like a
class.
brand.
Futura.
Yeah. Yeah.
A serif font would be like Times New
Nice.
Roman.
Yeah. And any other questions? Oh, okay. So we have another one. When should you use a professional designer versus doing it yourself? Do you want to go or?
You know that it's tricky to answer because obviously us as professional designers, we can tell the difference between when a professional has designed something and when a non-professional has designed something. Obviously, if you have the budget, it is always best to use a professional because you can tell the difference. You really can tell if they're thinking out, balance. hierarchy, color, how the logo is going to look placed wherever it is on the grid or the brochure. So if you are in a financial crunch and you need a non-professional designer, just ensure that they're following the rules of design, or if you yourself are designing something, go over the principles that we shared with you guys in this, because those are going to really help you to ensure that it looks like a professional is designing it. And then maybe you can find a professional designer friend and ask them like, hey, does this look like it was designed by a professional? What can I do better? But of course, I'm always going to advocate for using a professional designer.
Yeah, I think overall, like if you have a business or providing a service, it, the first impression is the only impression for coming from a designer standpoint. So it's like, do you want your brand to convey a trust to your target market? So I think people think that they can just create something on their own, but in the long run, you'd be saving money by investing in design and marketing, because you're going to hit that target market. You're going to know how to attract them by your designs and marketing. So overall, like, if you have a business, there should be some marketing and design budget to go through it, just so in the end and in the long run, like that first impression is like the only impression. So I think it's very important to like consult with a professional designer. We do have another question. How do you decide what elements are best to use on social posts? I think having a goal in mind. So if you want to work on gaining more followers, then you need to like have a call to action or a goal oriented in mind to create the design. Some elements to, if you want your people to get to know your brand, is start using your brand elements, your logo, strategically in social posts. And I always say design is paired well with copy for social posts. I think they go hand in hand and they both support each other. So having the goal for a copywriter and a designer, having them on the same page with the goal will help. Hannah, do you have anything else to touch with that?
Yeah, another thing when it comes to choosing elements is to not get your grid too overwhelmed with adding a bunch of elements. I get carried away with that. Sometimes it's so fun to see all the colors and different things that you can use, but as we've said before, simpler is usually better, because when someone is clicking on your Instagram page or your Facebook page for the first time and they see way too much color and things going on, it can be really overwhelming and their eyes have nowhere to rest. They don't know, okay, what am I here for? What am I looking at? There's no call to action. Everything's just kind of chaotic and all over the place. Maybe it's fun, but you do want to create an experience for your target market. One thing is to think about consistency. So if you do choose to use some sort of color or graphic element, keep using it in your grid without introducing other elements. I would give it your grid some time until you introduce new elements, just because it can be really overwhelming if all of a sudden the grid the following month is a complete new color and everything is different. It's kind of like, how can your target market trust you if your brand is constantly changing? It looks like you don't even know your own brand if it's just constantly shifting and there's new type and things like that. It can be really overwhelming. So be sure to be consistent in your designs.
Along with that, I always think of KISS, like keep it simple, silly, or Sally, whatever. I always keep that in mind because I do get carried away with adding a lot of things. So I always just keep that in mind, like keep it simple, silly. And I think that's all the questions we have. If you make sure to reference our website, invita.com, if you want to look into future webinars or follow us on social. And I think that's it. Thanks, everyone.